So if that's one of his problems, here's the other one. And this is the one that I think is, well, I was going to say fascinating, but it's also one where you people can put a lot of, you can make an effort, you can make a difference in the succession fight too, but you can make a lot of difference in this fight. And that's that in order to win, Trump and the MAGA Republicans and the disinformation campaigns essentially promised a whole lot of stuff to different constituencies that is mutually incompatible. Now, how do you square that circle going forward? And what I mean by that is that we know that about 65% of Americans want to protect abortion rights. And a number of people voted for Trump because he said he was going to make sure that abortion rights were protected in the states, right? You heard that all over the place. He said it himself repeatedly. And yet, as people like me pointed out, both the Republican platform and the Project 2025 call for a national abortion ban. And that's his real base. Those people are the ones who really turned out, I believe it's at 22%, to vote for him. And they did so at 87% of that 22% voted for Trump. How do you give them a national abortion ban and protect abortion rights? It is mutually incompatible. You cannot do that. So either they're going to have to kick it down the road, kick it down the road, kick it down the road, and just sort of never get to it, which they did in the first term with so many things, and their supporters simply didn't appear to notice that stuff didn't get done. Or they're going to have to make one of those constituencies very angry, which is a real problem going forward. Similarly, immigration. Trump ran to his neo-Nazi, if you will, base, his fascist base, by saying that he was going to deport up to 20 million undocumented Americans who had no matter how long they'd been here, no matter how integrated they were in the communities, right? However, a key constituency that he made great inroads to were Hispanic Americans. And those Hispanic Americans believed him when he said, I'm only going to deport criminals. Now, again, they didn't understand, apparently, that the MAGA Republicans have defined anybody who is undocumented as, by definition, a criminal, because they broke the law by coming into this country. But you cannot both protect your Hispanic voters and deport them. Mutually incompatible. And that is, aside from what the extraordinary deportation efforts that he's talking about would do to the economy. And one of the things that you're seeing, if you're watching the news, is a lot of threats from Trump's suggested director of ICE, the Customs Enforcement, that they're going to go after the Hispanic undocumented immigrants in urban Democratic dominated cities. Well, that's getting a lot of attention. I'm sure that's what they'll do. Why aren't they going to go into Florida and Texas first? The answer to that is because Florida and Texas's economies cannot survive without undocumented immigrants. They're just a huge portion of those economies. So they're not going to go in there first, at least, because that would destroy those states. So again, there's a tension there as well. Now, another one, tariffs. He has promised 10 to 20% tariffs on everything and up to 60, and he was, at the end of his campaign, he was saying up to 2,000, I don't care, percent tariffs on imported goods. And since the election, people are madly Googling tariffs, and they're realizing that those tariffs, if indeed he puts them in place as he has promised, are going to send prices through the roof. And they voted for him based on the idea he was going to lower prices. And just so you know, if prices actually lower in the United States, we're looking at a recession. Prices never come down. That's not a good thing when prices come down. What Biden and Harris did is they brought the rate of inflation from its high of a little under 9% down to what the Fed likes, which is about 2%. So it's already been saved. So maybe what Trump will say is he'll just say, look, costs haven't gone up since I became president, but he can't do that and put the tariffs on. Mutually incompatible. There is no way to put tariffs on goods coming from other countries and not have prices go up, because those prices, those higher tariffs, get passed on to consumers. And this is something that people who voted for Trump are suddenly realizing, that they have voted to make things more expensive. Now, my guess is what we're going to see with tariffs is a lot of fudging. That he's going to, the idea of the tariffs on China are very clearly to protect Elon Musk's command of the electric vehicle market in the US, and also to have leverage for the electric vehicle market in China. But my guess is there's going to be a lot of fudging around the edges of what those different tariffs might look like. So again, those things are mutually incompatible. Similarly, Social Security, insurance, and Medicare and Medicaid, and food benefits, the SNAP benefits that are in the Farm Bill, which the Republicans didn't manage to pass in the last 2 years, and there too, the constituencies that supported Trump are the ones who use those federal programs disproportionately, largely because they tend to be older counties. It's at the county level that people look at. But in the food security legislation, because rural areas tend to use those more than urban areas do, tend to use food benefits more than urban areas do, which is interesting. But I think, those of us who come from rural states get that, right? Well, that's what we grew up with. So how do you both do what Elon Musk is promising to do and what the Republican MAGAs want to do, which is to cut those federal programs, and still keep your constituencies? And they're looking at a number of different ways to do that. One of them is to say simply that they will leave the systems in place as they are right now, but make them different for people who have not yet tapped into them, so that they aren't going to be aware that they're having stuff taken away. But there are other ways, other suggestions that they have made that would be devastating for those populations. So there's another place where two mutually incompatible promises are all going to be sitting there in the White House. And how on earth are you going to split those babies, except perhaps simply doing nothing, or simply saying, well, I'm just going to make sure nobody can ever vote for me again, and therefore I will simply do whatever I want to do, whatever makes the most money for me. But this is the idea that he's just going to be able to start putting everything in place. Well, yeah, I mean, he's claiming the ability to do that, but what does that look like? What is he going to put in place? Now, again, I expect to see very early, very dramatic, very cruel and violent programs against undocumented immigrants. But for a full 20 million people, that's going to be very difficult to do. Not because he cares, but because it's really going to hurt a lot of economies for people who do care, like the governors of Texas and Florida. So there's a lot of reason to sort of take a deep breath and say, this is not as easy a plan as it looked when he would just promise everything to every different constituency.